In the last video, we discussed Bob Lazar and his good friend John Lear, who described an interaction between Lazar and live grey aliens on 3 different occasions. Today we're going to dive into a little bit about what Lazar shared with John Lear around the briefing documents that he read that are not publicly acknowledged. Lazar did do a long form video back in the 1990s, I think somewhere around 1991, where he described quite a lot of detail around the project at S4, how the propulsion worked of the craft. Included in the briefing documents were that the grey aliens were from Zeta Reticuli, a binary star system, that these grey aliens had been here for many, many thousands of years, going back at least 10,000 years, and that they had genetically modified human DNA 65 times throughout human history.
There's a small segment of the United States government that makes scientific and technological judgments from a knowledge base that is not available to the general public. If the following information is true, the United States government also makes judgments on a historical, philosophical, and even theological level from a knowledge base that is not available to the general public. These are excerpts from some of that information. When I went to work, I was flown from McCarran Airport in Las Vegas to Area 51, which is a highly secure government base on the Nevada test site. Area 51 is located about 125 miles north of Las Vegas, near the Groom Mountains and the Groom Dry Lake bed. From Area 51, I was bused to an even more highly secure facility located about 15 miles south of Area 51 called S4. S4 is situated at the base of the Papoose Mountains by the Papoose Dry Lake bed. The S4 installation is built into the mountain, and the 9 hangar doors are angled at about 60 degrees. These doors are covered with a sand-textured coating to blend in with the side of the mountain and the desert floor. The hangar was equipped with typical tools and extensive electronic equipment. It also had a machine with an X-ray emblem on it and an overhead crane rated at 20,000 pounds. As part of my indoctrination into the program at S4, I would randomly be taken into a small room which contained a table, a chair, and 120 or so briefings in blue folders. I'd be left there to read for varying amounts of time, usually about half an hour. So to keep from saying allegedly and supposedly in every sentence, I'll relay this information to you as I read it, since I've already put this disclaimer on it. This technology that you've learned about thus far was brought here by some alien beings from the Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 star system. These stars are located in the constellation of Reticulum, which can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. Zeta Reticuli is a binary star system, which means it is 2 stars, and is located approximately 30 light years from Earth. These beings are from Reticulum 4, which is the 4th planet out from Zeta Reticuli 2. The beings are 3 to 4 feet tall and weigh 25 to 50 pounds. They have grayish skin and large heads with almond-shaped wraparound eyes. They have very slight nose, mouth, and ear positions and are hairless. These beings said that man was the product of externally corrected evolution. They said that man, as a species, had been genetically altered 65 times. They refer to humans as containers, yet I don't know what we're containers of.
Extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thing. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say,
Oh, come on, that's so weird. That's a lie.
I'm not asking you to say what you believe to be a fact. I'm asking you to say what you read in a report that that is distributed at what may be the most top secret facility in the world. Okay. All right.
All right, I'll say it. It's so far out.
All right. Your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers. And that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
The souls. Meaning,
well, the souls or the bodies, whatever. Right? That's
meaning like we're containers for souls that they're going to use at some other point.
Right.
and that they had something to do with different prophets and biblical figures.
Yes.
What?
Well, that supposedly Jesus and two other beings were genetically engineered. They were implanted in people on Earth in biblical times, and their births were closely monitored. Now, just some little connections to that my wife had brought up were in the Bible. They said that the star had followed Mary wherever she went, and that all UFO sightings always start out as people, well, gee, that looks like a bright star, and well, in fact, they said in the Bible, the brightest star in the sky followed her where she went, and just make little connections like that.
Okay.
I don't know what else to touch on.
However, in this video, I'm going to share with you some extra little bits of information that was shared with John Lear. I'm going to read for you John Lear's post. This was on John Lear's Facebook page. John Lear has since passed away a couple of years ago. This is a copy of an email I sent to Bob Lazar tonight. I'm posting it in hopes that somebody on Facebook remembers JPL's head of Viking imaging name. I need to finish my post on the Mars rover. I'm writing about the end of the Mars rover program after 15 years of operation. Mars was actually the NASA Death Valley site north of Beatty, hidden behind Sawtooth Mountain. No rover pictures ever showed the real Mars. When Toby Owens, Mark Colotto, and George Molinar found the two frames, 35A76 and 70A13, out of billions of Viking photos from 1976 that showed the Cydonia region on Mars and the, quote, face on pyramids, you told me that they were not as high resolution as the ones that you had seen in the briefing documents on Mars at S4. So you and I drove down to Pasadena and rolled into JPL with your 20-foot jet car in tow. We took up all the JPL guest parking spaces and we walked into JPL headquarters like we owned the place, without an appointment or reservation, and asked to see the head of Viking imaging. To our complete shock and surprise, we were led immediately into his office and had a 30-minute conversation with him. What we wanted to know was, were there any high-resolution photos of Cydonia other than the ones 35A76 and 70A13 Owens, Molinar and Carlotto found? He told us no. Then we told him about the photos that you saw at S4, which were infinitely more clear and high resolution and showed the pyramids in detail. Each side of the pyramid had hundreds of doors, windows and balconies like they were apartments. We then asked him a far out question. Were the Vikings ever put into lower orbit? He says yes, but we didn't take any photos. Bob and I smiled as it became apparent to us just how big the lie worked. You don't tell anybody who's going to be in contact with the public what you were really doing. Even the head of Viking imaging. This is so that they can lie with conviction. Of course they took photos while in lower orbit, thousands of them, and some of those were shown to Bob at S4. Now, obviously, we have to take John Lear's word for this, that John Lear is telling the truth about his friend, Bob Lazar. But if we accept that Lear was telling the truth and that this is an account that Lazar described, then it's interesting because we can kind of compare that to a remote viewer, Joseph McMoneagle, who was one of the very first remote viewers that was in the Stargate program. He mentions remote viewing Mars 1 million years ago and seeing a giant pyramid. And he describes that this pyramid was a kind of hibernation chamber for some ancient civilization that had since gone extinct.
In May of 1984 at the Monroe Institute, I had been training with Bob for almost 14 months. learning to control my out-of-body experiences. I had had spontaneous out-of-bodies for many years, and Bob had been training with me in his lab at the last year of my time at the project, Stargate project, to teach me to control my out-of-bodies. I wanted to see if controlled out-of-bodies were better at producing information, collection information, than remote viewing. It turns out you can do very specific things with out-of-bodies that you can't do with remote viewing, but I don't think it's as good. If you want to know how the trigger mechanism works on a Chinese nuclear weapon, out-of-body's better, because you can go to the Chinese nuclear weapon and put your face in it, look around, do detailed drawing. But if you want to know where all the parts from the weapon came from, remote viewing's better, because all the parts are intricately linked together data-wise. So things are different for how you want to do things. In any event, during that period, my training officer, Skip Atwater, would come in from the project and test me to see whether or not my remote viewing was getting any better. And one of his tests that he brought, one of the training tests that he brought, was a target that I didn't know anything about. Normally I did mundane targets, like quasi-military targets. Well, this particular week, he brought a Mars target. I didn't know it was a Mars target. But he gave a sealed envelope, neither did Bob Monroe. He gave a sealed envelope to Bob Monroe, which inside had a card that said Mars 1 million years BC. Bob thought it was another Moonday target as well. And he had a list of coordinates. So Bob had this card in his shirt pocket, and we had a list of coordinates as targets. And the first set of coordinates was 44.89 degrees, 9.55 degrees west. I didn't know anything about the targets, as I was laying in a dark black cube in the lab, floating on a sea of salt, listening to hemisync tapes. And the first thing I heard was the coordinates. And this was my response. I got a great view of a pyramid form, sitting in a large depression. It's yellowish, ochre colored. I get clouds, a severe storm, major geological trauma. Then I was asked to visit the site before the trauma. They said, go back before the trauma. They said all the dirt had disappeared. There were now smooth walls. Everything was flat, megalithic. I said something about, gee, is this a new pyramid? Did they discover a new pyramid? Because it's really large. Shadow of people, fragments, memory of people. They said, go back to when they were there. Large people, thin and tall, wearing strange clothes, skin tight, very tight, almost can't see them. This is the actual target based on the coordinates. That's the face everybody's always referring to on Mars. This is actually the depressed area. This is the pyramid. It's actually a double-layered pyramid. This is the second set of coordinates that I got. In a canyon looking up steep, high walls that go on forever. Very intricate, huge sections of smooth stone carved out. Getting very large structures. Rabbit warren of huge corridors and rooms. I said the rooms were really large, and again I said something to him about this has got to be some new pyramids or something, because I don't remember ever seeing rooms this size in Giza or anywhere like that. That's a canyon, and that's the pyramid. Now what's really interesting about this particular pyramid, you notice it's sitting on the side of the impact crater. And that's a real trick, because that means the pyramid had to be put there after the impact crater. Because if the impact crater hit after the pyramid was there, it would have destroyed the pyramid. You can't have one and not the other. You understand what I'm saying? If that crater appeared after the pyramid, it would have destroyed that pyramid. The other interesting thing about this picture is you can measure the shadow of the crater, and based on the angle of the sun, you can estimate the size of the crater wall as being 3,000 meters tall. So that's a pretty deep crater. Now look at the shadow on the pyramid. Pretty tall pyramid. That's a 20,000 meter tall pyramid. Pretty big, huh? That's not the only thing interesting. That pyramid had to have been formed after the crater was formed. Here's something else interesting. That pyramid's even closer to the edge. And here's an even more interesting fact. There's the road in, there's the road out. I just find these really remarkable pictures. Here's another, this is a general area. Pyramid's huge, but different this time. The reason these were different is because they were a cluster. These are like shelters from storms. Designed for sleeping, I specified hibernation, sleeping through savage storms. I'm asked to find out why. They're an ancient people trying to survive. It's past their time and age. They're waiting for the return of someone sent to find a new home. Their world passed through the tail of a comet. I had a sense that their atmosphere was stripped away or destabilized when it passed through the tail of the comet. This is an old fort. Now what's interesting about the old fort, and it's something most people don't recognize, this is actually a pyramid. That's one side, that's the other side, that's the other side. The tip is missing off the top and it's hollow. I don't know if you can see that. Kind of interesting, isn't it? They call it the old fort. It's always referred to as the old fort. But that's a pyramid that's been tipped off. The tip's been taken off. That's a grouping of pyramids. And that's a building, or what's left of a building on a sort of a plateau. And that's the drawing I did of the larger beings. What I think in actuality, there really are no such thing as Martians. What I think Martians are is us. I think we're descendants of the original inhabitants of Mars. And we're the ones that never went back. Give you an idea of size, that's the rough size of the Pyramid of Giza. Give you an idea of scale.
I found the crossover there kind of fascinating because we've got kind of two angles here. Now, Joe McMoneagle didn't describe balconies and windows and doors like the photos that Lazar had meant to have seen. However, Joseph McMoneagle is referring to this pyramid as a kind of living place where people were hibernating and sleeping through a storm. The obvious difference between Joe McMoneagle and the story that John Lear describes with Bob Lazar is that Joe McMoneagle was viewing this pyramid on Mars about 1 million years ago. Joe McMoneagle did not see the same features that John Lear is describing, and as far as I'm aware, Joe McMoneagle has never tried to remote view Mars current day to see what the pyramid looks like today. However, there are satellite images that are fairly high resolution today, and we can see that there isn't a whole lot of structure or detail to the pyramid mounds. For Bob to have seen these documents at S4, it must have been in 1989 when he was still in the program, which obviously doesn't line up to the imagery that we are seeing or presented with from NASA. I think it's quite fascinating. I don't think we'll ever be told the truth, in all honesty. I really don't think that the governments of the world, the people that have the power and the control, are willingly going to share this kind of information. It will always remain secret and hidden from us, at least in our lifetime, I would presume, unless something dramatic changes. However, I think it's fascinating to hear different stories that kind of corroborate each other. Hope you enjoyed the video there, and I will see you soon with another one. Have a good day, take care, and goodbye.
Obviously, the ET craft do exist. Something had to build them, so there must be aliens. And since there are and the craft are there must be some sort of factory and an entire civilization somewhere.